Hey, welcome to Even More Mashed Up. We are the pop culture podcast that talks about all things pop culture. I'm Allan.
And I'm Patrick, and today we're talking about the Black Panther sequel. And so we'll be answering the question, Wakanda Forever or Wakanda for Never?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, that was about all I could come up with.
I was trying to think of what you could do for Wakanda Forever, and I was going in that direction, but for Never didn't strike me.
Yeah. Well, originally I was going to say Wakanda Never, but that didn't quite have the same rhythm.
Before we get into our rhythm entirely,
yes.
Quick programming note.
Yes.
You can, if you're really loving this podcast and feeling like you would like to spend some time with it during drive time. Oh, look at that. Fans just piling in at the desk, which it's the usual experience.
Pretty much.
So if you want to watch it or listen during drive time, cougarradio.net.
Yes.
On your car radio.
5 p.m. on Wednesdays.
That's right. 5 p.m. Wednesday.
That's right.
Look out, whoever the drive time guy is locally.
Yes.
Coming to get you.
Yeah, it's like, was it like KRZ or?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, can I start with a story about Wakanda Forever?
Okay.
So Vicky and I went to see it, not on opening night like you did, because you're an opening night guy.
I am.
And Vicky and I are more like a couple days later, early in the morning, avoid the crowd kind of.
Yeah, it was. Let's say I went opening night at 4:30 in the afternoon, so there was not a huge crowd.
There wasn't a big crowd.
No.
Okay. I thought maybe it would be a different experience if you had a big crowd with you. But so Vicky was sitting to my right. She always sits on the aisle.
Yes.
So she can get in and out of the theater. Smart.
Same.
And then to my left, a couple of seats over, was a family of 4. The youngest kid there he's about 7 years old. And I would say about an hour or so into the film, he was out of his seat. He was like dancing and spinning around.
Oh, really?
Vicky and I looked at each other like, that's cute.
Like like he was enjoying himself with the dancing and spinning around?
Oh, he was enjoying himself.
Not the film.
If you're asking about the film, I thought maybe he was. It's about a half an hour later when he turns to his mom and he asks in this very demanding voice, "Is this over yet?"
Oh, that's an hour and a half in. He's still got another hour.
Little did he know.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to take him by the hand and just say, "Dude,
yeah,
like this, no." Like
it's
so then as the final battle reaches its climax, like with the ship and we'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
He turns to his parents and he says to them, and I quote, "Why are we still here?" This kid was not a fan.
Yeah, not feeling Wakanda Forever.
And after he said, "Why are we still here?" my internal response to him, had he been my kid, was like you and me both, kid. Like, why are we still here? Which might be revealing too much of my hand.
I feel like the whole story kind of reveals your hand.
We've been talking about this movie for a long time.
We have been.
Marvel has been. They're not making terrible movies, but they've been sort of in doldrums. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
Like, the movies have just they felt like they've been treading water.
Yeah, I mean, Phase 4 has been, probably uneven, is probably generous.
Yeah, but even the uneven peaks haven't been all that high.
Well, No Way Home I thought was quite good.
Yeah.
I really like No Way Home was a fun film.
Yes, if you love nostalgia.
Yes, I do.
Then it was entirely made for you. Yeah, it was a fun film.
Very fun.
But I'm not sure that it reaches the heights of the best of Marvel.
Well, it's no Age of Ultron.
Like if you don't want to be serious, we can just cut this podcast right now.
No, I mean, if we aren't serious, then we don't have a show.
But we've been talking about this as the new tentpole. We've been talking about this as the movie that was going to...
This was going to salvage Phase 4. It was going to end on a strong note.
And kind of create direction.
Between it and She-Hulk, it was going to be a powerful 1-2 punch at the end of Phase 4.
Moving forward. So the kid, he worried me a little bit, Zach, because he's not a fan.
Mm-hmm.
Then, later that night, on Saturday, Vicky and I went out to eat with Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I should start. Then on Friday, you came into work after you watched it.
Yes.
And here's what you said to me. Mm-hmm. Tell me if this is incorrect. I have mixed feelings.
Yes.
There's a lot I need to sort through.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
that is all very true.
When that comes from you,
they're still.
I start
still working
thinking,
my way through.
Marvel's got a problem on its hands.
Yeah.
Like if you're not
still working through,
super enthusiastic,
yeah,
about the film. So anyway, then we go to dinner Saturday night,
mm-hmm.
and it was a grim dinner for the Panther.
Well, wait, before dinner,
yeah,
there was a series of texts.
I should say, Vicky.
Vicky's
really did not care for this film.
Yeah.
was, I would say, almost actively angered
Yes.
by this film.
I'm trying to
she
think,
was
do I have the...
super unhappy. And she's
don't
not
know if we
an
have the
angry
text.
person.
No, but she was not a fan of the... I'm not finding the text, so that's upsetting to me.
Well, that's too bad. As you keep looking...
I'm scrolling. You keep talking.
As we sat down to dinner that night, and you and Vicky started sharing like a litany of complaints.
Mm-hmm. I would say it was a litany.
Well, how long does a litany have to be
I don't know.
to be a litany? 15 minutes? Because you guys well exceeded 15 minutes.
Nah, I don't think that's true.
I think you could have filled the podcast. Anyway, we're sitting at CK's. We're having this dinner. And you ready?
I do have it, yes.
Okay, so we'll come back to the dinner in a minute. What did Vicky have to say about the film?
So the
Remind
first
me.
text, that was an excruciating film. Almost as bad as the kidney stone I just finally got rid of. To which your daughter Hope replies, what movie was it? Vicky, Black Panther, 2 hours and 40 minutes of crap.
Yeah, she was...
Vicky did not pull punches.
Not a fan and not pulling punches. But at dinner that night, what I realized was... It's saddening for me to say this, but I've been vindicated. We do live in the post-peak superhero era. If I had to identify a time of death, about 6:15 p.m. Saturday night at CK's. It's about where it died.
Really? Because you've been saying it died a while ago.
Well, but you had to join me.
Did I?
For it to really die. Well, because you always would argue against me, but now I think you're kind of with me, right? That for a host of reasons that we can talk about today, whatever the Marvel Cinematic Universe has built, we're not at the peak anymore, and that it can only be downhill from now. Not that there won't be occasional peaks on our way down, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I've said it before. My fears after Endgame, which I do really love Endgame, but my fears after it, between the 5-year jump and obviously characters being written out and things like that, but particularly the 5-year jump and
maybe focusing on characters like the Eternals,
wiping out half of the even before any of that, like between the 5-year jump, wiping out half of the people and then having them come back, after that film, I was just like, I feared that film broke the MCU in the sense of I don't know how you go forward from here. And I feel like Phase 4 has confirmed that they're not there really isn't a clear sense of how they are moving forward.
Right.
And
in retrospect, it would have been better to move to another big franchise.
Yeah, I feel like they really... Well, I mean, they didn't have them at the time, but I feel like somewhere in Phase 4... they should have done, particularly since, the next big thing with Kang and the Multiverse Saga isn't kicking off until February of next year with the Ant-Man movie.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time to not
about.
have, something, particularly in the films.
Right.
Because something
Marvel's
big.
MCU fans have gotten used to it being every 6 months, every 8 months.
Like something
of some substance, kind of coming down the pipe.
In retrospect, I really feel like Phase 4 should have at least introduced Fantastic Four or X-Men, if not both.
So Namor talks about being a mutant.
Yes.
So is that kind of opening the door? But obviously that's
he's the second one we found. Because we also had Ms. Marvel.
But not. That's not bringing the X-Men
to
the table.
That's
it's
establishing
these nerdy Easter eggs for people.
Well, it's establishing
that
mutants exist, but that's not really.
Yeah, it doesn't do it.
And in terms of establishing that mutants exist, when people say they want the X-Men, they want the X-Men. I mean, Ms. Marvel and Namor are nice, but
they're not.
They want the X-Men.
Yeah.
So
I think you mean Namor. You would call him what he calls himself, right?
Well, except that he says that. Or would you
colonize him like everybody else in the film does?
The rest of the film actually calls him Namor.
Right,
so.
Just to be clear. Yeah.
Well, but, he got that name from the colonizers, so... Because that's what they say. He's the son of Satan, which that was a nice little Easter egg.
I don't need any more Easter eggs.
Then, the whatever they said, the one without love, the Namor.
Right. He says, then I called myself Namor.
Yes. But everybody else, including his own people, call him Namor for the rest. The only time he's called Namor is in that one moment. It is.
It's not a good moment. So, are you ready to apologize?
Why would I have to apologize?
Because you've been berating me for 2.5 years.
I've not been berating you.
About peak superhero being cast.
I would not say berating.
I'd say there's been some berating.
No.
There's certainly been some scolding.
That's ridiculous.
No.
That is ridiculous.
Maybe Zach could go back and listen to our entire back catalog. I'm not sure when I first claimed post-peak superhero.
I think it was Iron Man 2.
Was it that far? Yeah. That feels a little deep. But Zach, if you could just go back and listen to the last 3 or 4 years. between now and next week, then we can we can sort out how long I've been right.
It's well, whoa. You haven't been right because we haven't actually been at post-peak superhero yet.
You literally have said that the entire Phase 4 sounds like post-peak superhero. Or do you think peak superhero is doldrums and just kind of treading water and telling stories that aren't going anywhere?
Well, we don't know that they're not going anywhere. They might go somewhere else.
See, here we go. I on a day like this, I appreciate your optimism.
I'm trying.
Like you still feel like like.
I mean, no, I do agree that I mean, I believe I said previously on
even
something
more mashed up
on the show or on the podcast we did that I thought, that I had I had absolute faith in Ryan Coogler and that,
yes, you did.
He was going to do it. He was going to close us out on a strong note and it was going to sort of shift things into Phase 5 on a positive.
Right.
And I gotta say, it didn't really accomplish that. Now, I will say,
for critics,
I give the film.
Seems as if it did.
Well, yeah, I'll get to that. I will say, I do feel. I totally lost my point because you interrupted me. I don't remember what I was going to say now.
It'll come back to you.
Yeah. But yes, we do seem to be largely moving on to the point about no, it's not. Moving on to the point about the critics. We do seem to be largely out of step in our critique of the film compared to critics and audiences. As fun facts will of course,
because fun facts are always numbers, and I am contractually obligated to appreciate numbers, and I hope that sounded more authentic this time around.
Not much, but slightly. So yes, on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yes.
It's currently at 84% with all critics.
Okay.
74% with top critics.
So top critics are more like in step with us, I would say.
Yeah. Currently at 95% with verified audiences. I
don't even know what a verified audience is.
I looked it up. These are viewers that Rotten Tomatoes confirms have bought tickets to the movie. Not seen the movie, bought tickets to the movie.
So as long as you buy a ticket, you can say whatever you want to say.
What's funny is that it's at 86 with all audiences, which would include it's lower with people who have not actually bought a ticket to the film.
Well, they might have bought a ticket for the film. They just haven't confirmed that they bought a ticket for the film.
So I mean.
So wait, what is the number for the fans?
95 with verified, 86 with all.
Yeah. So even those numbers compared to peak Marvel numbers. Not that good, right?
Well, I mean, the 95 with audiences is pretty good.
Yeah, but if you went back and you compared it to peak superhero, I think you would find better numbers, right?
I think that's probably comparable with the honest.
But you got to look at the critic too.
The critic numbers are lower, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
then of course, the other barometer we always use.
Do we use a different barometer?
It's box office.
Oh! I thought you went back to boxoffice.com for a minute.
I did. Box Office Mojo, you mean?
You went back to Box Office Mojo?
Yeah.
They let you in?
Yeah, they didn't make you
pay?
They did have They
put up a paywall.
So we got a couple. Well, they were bought out by IMDb and Amazon. So it did 180 million domestically.
180. Is that good for a weekend?
We'll get to that. And 330 million worldwide in its opening weekend.
Is that good?
So in terms of domestic,
yes.
Where does that put it in terms of all-time opening weekends?
12th.
You're very close.
I'm getting good at this.
It's 13.
Oh, I would never guess 13.
Right behind Incredibles 2 and right above Captain America Civil War.
It did better than Captain America Civil War.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of MCU films,
yes.
Where does this opening fall?
6.
8.
Okay.
Just behind Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Boy, that's a sad place to be. Okay. So when you say it's done moderately well,
it's done it's the biggest November opening I think ever.
Okay.
So it's done.
How many Marvel films are there?
I've lost count at this point.
So
20-something.
20-something. So it's in the top, like it's squeezing into the top third. If there are 24 movies.
Yeah. If there's like 24, it might be a little bit more than that, but that's probably close to that.
So it did pretty well.
There are 30 films.
Oh, okay. So it's closer to the top quarter.
Kidding. No kidding. That is hard to imagine.
Yeah.
So it's in the top quarter.
Yeah.
Now, does it have legs? What do the numbers look like since opening?
I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked at that.
Yeah, because that would be...
We'll find out. I mean,
that would be the next place to go.
There's no real big competition until Avatar comes out.
Is that big competition? That trailer
It's the next big film. So a lot of people think it might... And I mean, given the audience reaction, I think it might have decent legs. People seem to really like this film.
Yeah.
For reasons, somewhat.
Well, why don't we try to explore that?
Yes.
Because, like, what we might do for the rest of the show is think about, like, what they get right.
Yes.
And what they get wrong.
Yes.
Let's start with what they got right.
Excellent.
Okay? I would start with, I appreciated the film's insistence on remembering and celebrating Chadwick Boseman.
Yes.
There were several moments. To me, the best memorial was actually the opening credits where they usually flip through all the different images of heroes.
It was all Chadwick Boseman.
And they were all Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther.
Yeah.
That, I thought, might have been the most moving part of the whole thing for me. Like, for some reason, that really hit me.
Yeah, that hit me. I did struggle a bit with the first scene in the film where they actually, like...
The funeral?
No, not the funeral. The actual death.
Oh, that's right.
And I was like, the moment that I was like, I did not need that. Like, I kind of wish we had just opened on the funeral.
You feel like you got kind of piled on a little bit?
I was like, I don't, I mean, it's already a lot to deal with in this movie in terms of the loss of Chadwick Boseman, and then actually seeing, like, the film version of that, I was like, oh.
So, is that illness part of the canon in some way? Is it, like, something they're going to build a storyline off of? Or is
Doubtful.
To me, that's a weird choice, unless there's something in his disease
I think
that will become part of...
Well, I think the only thing it does is it establish that carries on at least into this film, is it establishes Shuri trying to recreate the heart-shaped herb.
Right.
And I think that's what's important in that scene terms of what carries into the rest of the film. Like that's the one thing that I think it did.
Find that less interesting.
Otherwise, it seemed to be largely a kind of homage to Boseman's death.
How about the funeral?
I struggled with the funeral a little bit.
Okay.
Because
this is the part where we talk about things that they did right.
Yeah, I know, but
I'm asking the wrong question.
I did struggle. Well, just because there's just the weird moment where they're walking, the casket through the streets.
Yeah.
And everyone in the family and everyone in the royal court, like, they're all very somber and serious.
Yeah.
And everybody in Wakanda around them is smiling and dancing and happy and it was just a weird sort of juxtaposition of emotions. Like, I guess it was supposed to be kind of a celebration.
As a funeral ought to be.
But I kind of wish there would be.
I
wish there had been something in the film to explain that, because the entire funeral is just visual. Like, I don't think there's any dialogue much at all. And I wish there had been something more to explain that, because particularly the close-up shots on Ramonda, where she, like, sees the mural of T'Challa and things like that. Yeah. Like, it was a weird juxtaposition. The funeral scene was a weird juxtaposition of emotions for me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I hear that. And then there was the montage of Boseman later, like, where you kind of, like, there was a brief bit where you kind of, like, saw him in different scenes. I think Shuri, right? Like she... After,
oh, yeah. There were...
and to me, that was okay, but kind of more expected. But there was an effort. Mm-hmm. To commemorate and celebrate.
And I think generally where the characters were dealing with their grief over the loss of T'Challa, all of that I think felt very real and powerful, because obviously they were dealing with their grief over Boseman.
Did not always find that convincing, to be honest. When we get to things that they didn't do well, I had some questions about. Like, I'm not sure I entirely buy that.
Okay.
In fact, so here's the thing. I used to be a book review editor for the Journal of American Ethnic History. And you've read a lot of book reviews. We've both read a lot of book reviews. Mm-hmm. One of the book reviews I really don't like to read is the book review about the book I would have written.
Oh, yeah.
Like the guy that writes about, this is what I would have done, and doesn't really engage the actual text. Mm-hmm. I feel as if I'm about to make that mistake, but I'm going to say this anyway.
Okay.
I feel like this needed to be a film about grief and mourning. Mm. That it needed... if I were making the film, and again, so I'm being that guy, I would have thought of something like Logan as a model. Because Logan was a superhero film, but it was a superhero film that really kind of probed aging and, like, mortality and death. Mm-hmm. And I think that this movie would have been better served doing that. I don't disagree with you that there is kind of there's that thread of mourning and grief through it, but it gets so overwhelmed by all the other stuff they kind of pack into the film that I feel like it didn't get the space it needed. And I think it would have been a fascinating film to watch a royal family grieve somebody dying much too young, and then trying to put the pieces back together.
Yeah,
like that's enough for a movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I mean, I've seen a lot of people on Twitter and whatnot sort of talking about the film. Like, one of the strengths of the film is its sort of engagement with sort of mourning and grief.
Yeah,
so I think
you felt that because I
felt it some well, but I will. Part of it too is for a lot of the film, I'm willing to give it a little bit of leeway / benefit of the doubt because obviously Coogler is not making the film he originally wanted to make.
There's no doubt about that.
There's no and so you can kind of see there are sort of remnants of the film I think he wanted to make in the Namor Black Panther conflict.
Yes.
And then so he's got a lot to juggle in this film.
That's exactly what my notes say as well. And he's also juggling like Disney politics.
Well, that's where I was going next.
What he wants to say and what the corporation will let him say.
I mean, it's one thing to do Logan at the point where the X-Men films were, which they were kind of basically done at that point. And
dude, we just watched Eternals.
Right, but I'm saying,
Disney,
Disney doesn't think they're done. The X-Men franchise at that point
the
knew
people
it was
that
done.
were in charge of it,
and Jackman knew, so you could get away, I think, with that.
Yeah,
I don't know that within the Disney politics, like you can do, particularly what was supposed to be probably the next big tentpole character after all the original ones left.
Because you can see the Marvel Universe being literally built around Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only one that makes sense.
100% makes sense.
Yeah.
And he's gone. So I totally agree with you. Like, whatever criticisms I now give the film, I totally understand that Coogler was put in this really precarious position where it would be almost impossible to make the film I wanted.
Yeah.
Which would have been a much more introspective film and would have gotten rid of a lot of the pyrotechnics.
Well, I don't
need.
There was he's done a couple interviews, and I guess the original plan was that the film was going to be about T'Challa struggling with being gone for 5 years during the blip. Like, that was going to be kind of the threat. And that they also wanted to bring in more of the version of T'Challa that was in the What If episode, where Boseman was just having just tons of fun with the character. So, would have been very, very different.
Right.
Yeah,
agreed. So it was very difficult. Another thing that I like about Black Panther, and I liked about this, but I also was a little disappointed by, is Black Panther has always been, in one way or another, kind of an inherently political character. No matter how he was handled at Marvel, sometimes really well as a political character, like thinking about Priest's run on the series. Sometimes, as drawn by some mid-'60s kind of journeyman artists, probably bad politics. But like Black Panther has always been kind of politically implicated no matter what. And there were some touches here that I appreciated in terms of politics. But it felt like there was so much crammed into this film that you don't get enough grief, you don't get enough politics, you get lots of stuff, but it doesn't add up to quite what I would want.
Yeah, well, I think I liked some of the geopolitical stuff, particularly early in the film when you've got kind of Wakanda, the West, and then ultimately Namor's Talocan.
Right.
That you've got kind of they did some of that stuff early that was kind of complicated and interesting.
Right.
And then I think it kind of slips into kind of a standard superhero in a way that I think becomes very problematic, because in the beginning of the film you've got both kind of Talocan and Wakanda pitted against the West. And then as the film develops, it's Talocan and Wakanda pitted against each other. And they're not really they're playing the West's game, like they're turning against each other rather than,
which the West tries to do.
Yeah.
The tension between wanting to say something, I think, and Disney politics again becomes very clear here, because that opening scene at the UN where they talk about performed civility, I think it's Queen Ramonda who's like, well, this is just performative. Like, you all sit at a table and you act like you're cooperating, but in reality, the United States is going to kind of head off and do whatever it wants to do. Or in this case, one of
my favorite moments of the film is when the French and the U.S. representatives are talking, and there's a shot of Ramonda where she's sitting there silently with a look on her face that could not have screamed white people in exasperation more. Like I'm shocked it hasn't been memed yet because I'm just like that. It was just a moment where it's like
it can only be a matter of time. But then I had a scary moment when they parade in the French mercenaries. Mm-hmm. That like this clearly means like we're going back to freedom fries and all that kind of stuff, right? Because the French are such terrible people.
Well, no, because it's not. We wouldn't go back to freedom fries because the French didn't do anything bad to the U.S. Wakanda's not going to have.
Well, they kind of failed the U.S. because those mercenaries are really American mercenaries, even if they're French. Yeah. But anyway, it just reminded me of the bad old days of like having to order freedom fries and whatnot.
No. But yeah, no, I again, there's a better geopolitical thriller in this film.
Yeah.
If they had shorn off, I think, some of the excess storyline. Something
needed to be shorn.
Yeah.
There was shorning to be done.
So, yeah.
But it was not shorn. Yeah. So the idea that Val, who I have to say, I still am not really invested in her as a character.
No, she's on my what doesn't work list.
Okay. But when she says, like, I go to bed every night dreaming about the United States with vibranium, I'm like, okay, but that's definitely...
Yeah.
That's true. But again... It's kind of mentioned in passing, and then the formula asserts itself. In the end, this felt like a really competently made formula superhero picture to me.
Yeah, with glimpses of something more that it could have been.
Yeah, right. But the formula ultimately just, to me, extinguishes or like eclipses what it might.
Yeah. Well, and I think again, a lot of that I think has to do too with the loss of Boseman, because
for sure
one of the things that struck me at the end is they make the point about how Shuri is becoming too subsumed by violence or vengeance.
Yeah, right.
She has to defeat Namor and basically says that I've become too consumed by violence, and I'm like it's the Civil War plot for Black Panther.
Yeah,
we're doing this again.
Yeah, were you surprised that she came to this conclusion?
No,
the entire movie to me was so telegraphed. Like when the kid's like, "Why are we still here?" I'm like, "Well, because we haven't seen the Midnight Angels yet, kid. Like wisen up. They showed you the suit. We're not leaving until you've seen the suit in action. Like I just want to say, grow up, kid. I mean, come on. Like that's the most naive kind of question you can ask. Why are we still here? Because there's still special effects budget.
Okay, to be fair, the kid is like 7 and may not have the deep narrative understanding of how superhero films work. Like I can just picture him in the theater, like, sit down, kid. You've got at least one mid-credit scene. Jesus Christ.
You've never been to the theater
been to a movie? Like, don't you know the MCU?
There's a formula to this.
And the kid's like, I'm 7.
I ran out of popcorn 40 minutes ago,
I'm 7. Like, I've only seen movies post-Endgame.
Oh, what a sad life.
I was gonna say, like,
that's it.
I mean, that's 2015. God. We're not far from Endgame's 2018-19, so that's...
So, speaking of the mid-credit scene, it's kind of a final moment where the film tries to do some politics, I think.
Yeah.
In T'Challa's son.
Yes, Toussaint.
Yeah. Spoiler alert.
We probably should have mentioned that at the top of the show. Yeah, there will be spoilers.
There could be some spoilers coming. Clearly a reference to the Haitian Revolution.
Yes.
But it's such a passing reference to the Haitian Revolution. I'm sure some people made the connection. Mm-hmm. But to what end?
Yeah,
to what end except kind of making so they kind of start with a political point and they end with a political point, and so much of the in between is unfocused. I like the idea.
Remember, this is the what they did well section.
Right. I like the idea of Wakanda as kind of a revolutionary force in the world. Mm. That it's reaching out to other African nations. That the Black Panther's kid is being raised in Haiti, like this really kind of foundational part of Black history.
Yeah. Well, it does sort of follow through on the end of the first film where T'Challa was sort of buying the buildings in L.A. and was supposed to start the outreach, which I wish they had kind of done more of in this film.
And so I like that they're making these kinds of references. Mm-hmm. The other film I wish they would make sometime, and I say this as a Quaker pacifist, is the film where Wakanda actually builds a better world, not by caving into the West and not by burning it all down. Mm. Like in the superhero kind of movies that we get, those are the two options. Yeah. Like you're either complicit or you're a revolutionary. And the Wakandans in the MCU sit at a particular place where they could do something different. Mm-hmm. They could, and it seems like T'Challa wants to choose something different. I think the one community center is inadequate.
Yeah.
But there are hints in this film of a broader outreach That would be a great movie to watch. Like, I would so love, again, as a Quaker pacifist, to watch a movie where people say, hey, you know what? We can build a better world and we don't have to punch people and blow stuff up to make it happen.
Right. Yeah.
You say that like
I'm just saying,
it's never going to happen.
That 7-year-old kid is going to hate your movie.
Well, everybody's going to hate that movie. I get it. But I wanted either...
No, I can think of 4 people that would like that
There
movie.
you go. Me, Vicky, Bobby, Hope.
That's about right.
The 4 Quakers you can name. Well,
there's the guy on the oatmeal, too.
It's so hard to be a Quaker. I'm just telling you. Like, it's not easy to be a friend. So, those are the 2 films I would have preferred to have seen. Yeah. But anyway.
So, other
things they did right.
I liked that it was helmed by a predominantly female cast.
I think...
Can
I say for a moment at the beginning, I was really excited about the idea about this being a film about empowered women. Mm-hmm. And then it again, like how many themes have we already raised that are like big themes that you might base an entire film around, but when you cram them all into the same box, I thought it lost its punch. I liked the idea and the intent. I'm not sure that it carried through the entire film so much. But you do.
Yeah, again, it's something I need to see the film again.
I don't think I could watch it again right now.
I could watch it again.
I need some time.
I could watch it again. I'm hoping it's like, because even when the first time I saw Endgame, I was like, that's a weird movie. And then I saw it again. I was like, no, actually, I've liked Endgame more every time I see it.
Well, here's a surprise.
I'm cautiously, I would like to think that will happen with Wakanda Forever. Like, I will go see it and I will like it even better.
Maybe you can talk me into it then.
No, but yeah, so I like that. And then
by the way, this isn't the worst Marvel movie ever made.
No.
By a long stretch. But it's not a transcendent Marvel movie.
No. And then the other thing that I had on my list of things that I like, besides, Ramonda, Shuri, Okoye, Nakia, Riri, really the only male characters of significance are M'Baku, Namor, and to a lesser extent Ross.
Yeah, and Ross is hardly a major character.
So I do like that in this day of, very sort of male-focused, testosterone-filled superhero films that we did get one that is led by a overwhelmingly female cast.
Yeah, and I would watch a third movie I would have preferred to have watched would just be Nakia.
Yeah.
Like, just, I think, really interesting, very charismatic on screen, has a story to tell that's not Wakandan based and isn't technological based, but it's very personal. And she's one that
they've done a nice job of taking what is a somewhat problematic character from the comics, because she basically goes crazy because she's so in love with T'Challa and he rejects her, that she becomes a supervillain. They've
that
done
is somewhat problematic.
They've done a much better job with Nakia and then the last thing that I liked, which of course you will of course know that I liked this, was the Killmonger cameo.
Yeah,
I liked that.
I don't have any complaints with it. Yeah.
So yeah.
Again, Killmonger was a character I thought was kind of hard done by in the first one.
Yeah, well, I would argue Namor gets even more Killmongered than Killmonger in this film. Which might be on my list of things that
I was going to say. Are we moving to things that didn't work?
Okay, number one, I feel like we've already kind of touched on that somewhat in our list of positive things.
Well, I'm sure in our list of things that they didn't do quite as well, there'll be good stuff too.
Oh, I'm sure.
It'll sneak in.
Oh, I'm entirely sure.
Because we're balanced like that.
We are.
All right, what do you got?
So, overall, my sense of the film as I was watching it is just from like a standpoint of the narrative of the film.
Okay.
It felt very kind of strung along and plot hammery in a lot of places.
Yeah, I'm not a literary critic, but I think I know what you mean by plot hammery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where things are happening because they have to happen.
Right.
Right.
And that goes back to my point that it often felt like you knew the film's story.
To some extent, but there were also things that just happened. Like the one that really stood out to me was Ramonda stripping Okoye of her position in the Dora Milaje, because there was nothing. For me, there was nothing prefacing that in the film. Like that just came out.
It's a very weird choice on her part.
Of nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a whole conversation earlier when Okoye and Ramonda were talking about like taking Shuri on the mission.
Yeah.
Didn't seem to be any abnormal tension there. The fact that Ramonda...
She let her take her daughter.
Yeah. The fact that Ramonda, when she's firing Okoye, brings all the, like, you sided with Killmonger against me and my family. I'm like, well, you're not wrong, but I feel like you might have brought that up before now.
Characters do what they need to do.
Yeah. Because we've established that Okoye is not going to go against tradition as long as she's a Dora Milaje. We see that when she objects to the one using the knives. She hates the Midnight Angel costume so much that she's going to be wearing it.
Oh, 100%.
Which means you have to get out of the Dora Milaje. So it's like you can see, it's like, oh, this is why she has to be fired now.
Yeah.
So that she can then take on the Midnight Angel costume.
And when you can see the plotting like that, it's a problem.
So that was one.
That's fair.
Those were. Oh, and then the other one for me was with Nakia, who Ramonda goes to her and says, I need your skills as a spy, and she's like, I haven't done this for 6 years. Later that day, she finds Talocan. I'm like, wait a minute, like I haven't done this for 6 years, but I found in a day the one person who knows where I need to go, and now I'm infiltrating Talocan. Like it felt like too much of a coincidence.
It felt to me very odd that the Black Panther would have a child, not in Wakanda.
Well, they explained that they wanted to keep him away from the politics of everything.
I don't think that's how royal families work. But they had to make that choice because he needed to be the mid-credit scene.
Yeah.
Like if you start with him, then the mid-credit scene and all the the oohs and the ahs and the emotion.
Well, and even early on when Shuri first suggests that she's mad at Nakia, I'm like, oh, Nakia obviously didn't come to the funeral.
Yeah,
like he was like, oh, that's why she's mad.
Yeah, and why she wouldn't come to the funeral? It feels a bit contrived.
Yeah.
At points.
Yeah.
Maybe because I said this before. There's way too much stuffed into this film.
Yes.
It's trying to accomplish way too much. Mm-hmm. If I could give one bit of advice to the DC or DC too, but the MCU folks, we don't need 3-hour films. You almost never need a 3-hour film.
Yeah.
Make a good
2 hours.
I would say like 100 minutes.
Yeah, 100 minutes is
hour 40. Like in the old days, you could tell a really great story in that amount of time. I think
2 hours is good.
I think we've gotten used to the idea that we can just make whatever we want, and that it's been damaging to Marvel films.
Yeah,
they'd be better to tell a story, a really focused story, than to do what they did here.
Well, and because of that, there are also a number of plot holes.
Oh, do you want to talk about plot holes
in the film? Yeah, because there is a few. The biggest one for me was when Okoye discovers that the Talakani can't be killed. Like, she stabs them, and then they all get up, and she makes a very clear point of talking about it a couple times in the film, and then it never comes up again. I'm like, that seemed like an important detail. Like, why are they not able to be killed? Like, I don't really understand that at all.
Which also raises the issue of violence in the film, but maybe we want to do plot holes first, then we can come to violence next.
We can get to violence,
So what other plot holes do you want to...
Well, there's that. The Wakandans / Shuri's plan to confront Namor with one boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean against a sea-living people. I'm like,
it's classic military strategy.
Yeah, you bring one boat.
Force everything onto one boat.
Yeah, like that was...
Go to the where you have no support in your enemy. It's like, you know what it is? It's the French at Dien Bien Phu. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, just so you agree.
Oh, totally. But yeah, I was just like,
that's how you lose the war in Indochina.
Seems like a really bad. Yeah, that was a really bad plan.
Yeah,
I'm just like
Dien Bien Phu.
And I could see it if they wanted to argue.
You're really not interested in my historical references at all, are you?
No, because they're not really meant to be a historical reference. They're to demonstrate sort of your knowledge.
Like when you display your literary crit skills. Okay, whatever, dude.
Well, that's substantive to the discussion.
All right, go on. More plot holes. Plot holes.
And they could explain it because it's Shuri's plan.
You know what we should call this part of the show?
Plot holes?
No, plot roast. It's like a pot roast, but it's a plot roast because you're roasting the plot.
Yeah, we got it. Yes,
welcome to even more mashed ups plot roast.
Yeah, that's not. I'll let you have that one.
I like that one.
It's not bad.
Had you said that? It's like defund the cannon police. Had you said that,
no,
we'd still be rolling with it. But I said it,
defund
so
it
is immediately dismissed.
Defund the cannon police is terrible. I'll give you plot roast. Plot roast was good.
I think we should bring plot roast back in the future because you are a big plot roaster.
Yes. So continuing the plot roasting.
Yes, go.
So the whole because they did set up the whole thing right prior to that M'Baku tells Shuri to be merciful or to don't be vengeance filled and whatnot.
Right.
So you could make the point like, yeah, that's why the plan is so bad, is because Shuri's not really thinking straight, and she's like, oh, one boat's enough.
Yeah, but it's a really big boat.
But it's not in the film. So that was that.
Yeah. So you're kind of filling a pothole there.
Yes.
Or a plot hole.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm basting the plot roast.
Nice. You're no-prizing it. I hear what you're doing.
The fact that Riri just has Stark tech floating around, including what looks like a mini arc reactor.
Haven't we seen people going around like cleaning up after all the superhero
Well,
battles?
I will say, maybe because they do have the Armor Wars series that's coming out.
Yeah.
Which in the original plot was Tony being worried about all of his tech being out there and basically going and getting it back.
Okay.
So maybe that's a setup for that, but again, that's not in the thing.
Right.
And then the other thing was at the start of the film, she said she wasn't going to be working on the heart-shaped bird anymore because she thought the Black Panther was a thing of the past. Mm-hmm. And then I guess she just changed her mind.
Yes. As she did with killing Namor, as she did with Vengeance, as she did with burning the world. I felt as if... I understand that when you're grieving, mm-hmm. one of the stages of grief is anger. Mm-hmm. But I felt like the movie relied so much on just the assumption of anger and the way the anger drove her that it never felt developed to me.
Well, for me, it's a similar issue, except that for the first half of the film, Shuri's reaction to T'Challa's death was throwing herself into science.
Right.
And then halfway through the film, it became anger and vengeance. I'm like, wait a minute, when did we make that? That was another thing. I was like, wait a minute, I get the whole... You know, she's throwing herself into science, which she always leaned to anyway. She didn't believe in... She no longer really believed in kind of the spiritual side of things. And even though she had sort of a tenuous connection to that to begin with.
Right.
And then halfway through the film, it's all she's rage and vengeance. And I'm like, wait a minute. So which reaction is it? Like, it shifted halfway through.
When they talked about broken people making the best leaders, mm-hmm. number one, I don't think that's necessarily true. Yeah. And in fact, I'm going to argue it's not true. Not that you can't be broken and become a good leader, but that it
makes you a good leader.
Yeah, seems questionable. But it really got me hoping that Shuri was going to stay with the science and the non-spiritual, mm-hmm. and that Nakia would be the one that inherited the Black Panther mantle. Yeah. But obviously, I did not get that out of this movie either.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's. I think, talking about kind of, as you said, that there's too much in this film. One of the things, I think because there's so much in the film, I think Shuri's arc in particular gets underdeveloped.
And that's a problem.
Because
she's going to become the Black Panther.
She's going to become because when she becomes the Black Panther, we all know it's coming, it's a foregone conclusion.
Right.
It didn't have quite the resonance that you might have hoped.
Right, and if the Black Panther is the tentpole moving forward, then maybe this is a movie where you really need to make sure that Shuri gets the appropriate kind of focus.
Yeah, and
there's just too much in it.
Yeah, there was too much that I think they should have carved out the Midnight Angels plot.
Didn't need that at all.
I would carve down the Everett Ross Val stuff.
Don't need it.
And use that and maybe even the Ironheart stuff.
Don't need it. I would cut that as well. And
use it to actually tell, kind of, so that Shuri's development feels more organic, because it just felt like it's like there's the one mention early on where she's going to burn the world, and then it's not mentioned until the final act of the film again. I'm like, I can see where you were trying to lay the groundwork, but there just was not enough groundwork laid for that.
I would share all of the stuff you just talked about, and I would have a serious conversation about leaving Namor out too, or at least using Namor in a much more peripheral kind of way, because again, what I want is the movie about grief and mourning, and a very introspective film. And Namor, as presented, doesn't really inspire introspection so much as it does violence.
Yeah,
which maybe we could talk about next.
Yep.
Because that was one of the things that most put Vicky off about the film.
Yeah,
and it was in some ways maybe because it treats Namor and his people like they're not real human beings. That it's easier to like get all stabby on them.
Yeah.
But it just felt like a particularly violent and a particularly kind of brutal violence in this film.
Yeah, I agree.
Like at the end, it looks like Namor has killed off a large number of Wakandans.
Oh, well, between the massive attack on the civilian population of Wakanda.
Right. Because you see all these individual moments of rescue, which you're supposed to feel good about, but then you're like, well, how many people didn't get rescued in that? Yeah.
There's that. And then, I don't know how many Wakandans were packed onto the boat, but at the end there's like 10 on the top, surrounded by like the entire Atlantean army.
Yeah.
And then, I mentioned this in our dinner conversation. There's the scene where the Wakandans are falling off the boat.
Yeah.
And some of the shots of the Talocan where they are just stabbing into the ocean.
Yeah.
At what you presume
it's like a feeding frenzy.
Yeah, and they've just got this, like, there was a savagery and, like you said, a brutality to what they did, which also made the resolution at the end. Like, how how do you make a treaty with these people?
And Namor might be a somewhat introspective person, as presented in the film, but Namora is not.
No.
Like, she is bloodthirsty and just bent on violence. And then the big warrior, I can't remember, Atuma, also. Like there's
To be fair, that's Atuma in the comics.
Right, but there's nobody else in the population.
Not that's individualized, yeah.
Right, that's individualized or at all
Except
thoughtful.
for the one that gets killed, who's the nice one.
Right, yeah. It just felt like this, given the casting and the presentation and the history of Namor and his people, it just feels dodgy to me.
Well,
that they feel so inhuman, and underdeveloped throughout.
Well,
the film.
and that's some of the issues, sort of broadening from the violence that's very much a part of Namor and his people's representation. Just kind of looking at them as a representation of, indigenous American populations.
Which they clearly are.
They're
grounded in that story. Like, they know the Dagamas and the Balboas and the Cortezes of the world.
It's cold, man. It's not cool. I'm just going to let that one slide.
All right, you always do.
You get plot roast, okay?
All right, fair enough. No more Dagamas.
But yeah, there's a couple things that I just find very, and there's been a lot of stuff online sort of celebrating Namor.
Right.
And kind of
there
his
might
representation of indigenous peoples.
In Namor.
But there's also, like, number one, they're clearly, we mentioned the violence, which is one thing, but their whole kind of aesthetic is one based in representing indigenous American populations as pre-modern and primitive.
Right.
Like, part of me is, I'm like, they've had vibranium at least as long, if not longer, than the Wakandans. And they aren't near the technological development of the Wakandans.
That's some pretty impressive stuff under the water. Yeah,
but it's all still based very much in kind of a primitivist aesthetic.
The aesthetic, I agree with.
And so it's like, there's a way that they're still very much depicted in. Yeah, and part
when you
of
go
that,
down, you enter like this world of wonder, kind of like it's a small world, kind of.
Yeah, well,
experiencing.
It's very like Wakanda in the original comics.
And I think actually that's a really great comparison.
Yeah. But there's a lot, and so there, there's that.
Yeah.
There's the fact that, as I said, Namor gets, I'd say, even more killmongered than killmongered in that, on the one hand, yes, he along with Wakanda, they sort of share that resistance to Western colonialism, Western imperialism.
Right.
But Namor's response to that is wipe out everyone but us. Like, he's wiping out the colonizers and the colonized.
Right.
And he kills Ramonda, and he's like, I'm coming back in a week. Like, he is so clearly vilified that it's hard to see him as... For me, it's hard to see him as, the sympathetic... Everyone keeps talking about it as an antagonist or as an anti-hero. I'm like, he's the villain of this piece.
Well, in the comics, I mean, Namor has often been the villain.
Yes.
Right? And or at best, an anti-hero.
Yeah.
And so, like, there is this kind of comic truth to him, I guess. But, like, speaking of there's a couple of moments where he and his army are depicted as so bloodthirsty, and yet they stop the violence at the weirdest moment. So there's the moment where Atuma and Okoye are battling on the bridge outside of Boston. And he's killed left and right, Atuma has. Like, he kills everybody that comes across him. He defeats Okoye, and then he says, "You are not worthy of my blade." And I thought to myself, she's the only one that's been worthy of your blade to this point.
He killed a whole bunch of other people that apparently were less worthy than her.
So the way in which they build up these people as incredibly violent, and then they stop the violence. Well, also, when they attack Wakanda, and Namor literally is standing triumphant over the people. He can enslave them. He can do whatever he wants to with them to make them do his will. He's like, I'm going to come back in a week to see what you want to do.
Well, he's literally standing outside the window as he's killed Ramonda saying, you've got a week. And I'm like, why? Like,
yeah.
But
what are you thinking, man? Like, it just. And then the final battle scene. Have I said this before? Stop making big set piece final battle scenes. They are so boring. Like, I literally am since maybe the first or the second Spider-Man film with Tom Holland. Just like I don't need them anymore. I have. Do you not find them boring? Were you excited when the Midnight Angels flew in?
Oh, no. I didn't care about that. No.
Were you excited to watch the Black Panther kind of use her claws to kind of like scale down the battleship?
No. I did
fight sideways.
I did like the Black Panther Namor battle because it felt smaller just between the two of them. Like I did, I liked when they were on the beach. Though part of me it does not make sense. I'm like, so Namor's just been dried out by the heaters. They land on a beach, like 10 feet from water.
Yeah.
And he doesn't immediately go to the water.
Just sprint for the water,
like,
baby.
He's like, I'm just going to... And then he fights with her, and then he's like, now I'm going to go for the water. I'm like, that seems like...
Can I say, this was not Aquaman. Like, one of my fears was it would be Aquaman, just because Aquaman made me think of, like, all, like, fish people storylines as inherently ridiculous. It wasn't that bad. But when they discovered that the key to defeating Namor was putting him under, like, a tanning lamp...
Several
they had a tanning lamp on each side.
Yeah.
I just thought, because they said, do we have the technology to build this kind of thing? And I'm like, have you been to a tanning salon? These things have been built since like the late 70s.
Yes, no. Wakanda can make sonic weapons and sonic shields.
But like a little space heater.
But to retrofit one of our ships into a space heater.
Oh, I don't know, man. A space heater.
That's tough.
Do we have the technology?
Yeah.
To make I don't know, man.
Again, I mean, when you're fighting a person who's entire... The other thing is the very long conversation between Riri and Shuri to get to the boys like, hey, we can defeat him if he can't get to water. I'm like, yes. That is, like, true about all water-based people.
And fish,
you take them out of the water, and they become much easier to defeat.
Maybe they don't have your same level of experience with water-based people.
I guess that's
the
maybe
best
it's just a standard comic book trope that I'm just
plot
used
hole
to.
that I can kind of, like,
so
fill in. One more thing on Namor, who... I want to like in a lot of ways.
Yes.
But the wings on his feet?
Oh, my God. Which I've seen people praising that as well.
No, people, come on.
Yeah, no. When it first showed up in the trailer, I'm like, oh, they've got flapping wings.
And you could hear the wings.
You could, yes.
And you're just like, no.
Yeah, no, because his wings don't flap in the comics. They're just kind of there.
Yeah.
But yeah, they went hard into the flapping ankle wings.
It could, like, tiny little wings like that really lift an entire body positioned on the ankle?
Well,
I wonder about the physics of it.
They're clearly super strong wings.
I guess so. They're tiny though.
They are. Yeah, no, it
but
does.
They're loud. It was like
that shows how mighty
Blade
they are.
Runner 2 kind of
shows how mighty the wings are. But yeah, it was. I was really surprised they went that route because I'm like, that's one of those things that works on the comics where yes, he has little ankle wings, but we don't actually show them flapping in the comics.
Right.
That when you translate it into the film, it's like, yeah, maybe that's one of the places where the comics, we're able to do something that works better.
Yeah. So, I'm all for Indigenous representation.
Yes.
I just feel like there were moments where Namor was undersold or done poorly by.
Yeah, I mean, just the way, like I said, the way that he, I don't know that we're going to see, after the first Black Panther film, there were a ton of Killmonger was right shirts.
Right.
I don't know that we're going to see Namor was right, even though a lot of Namor is right. Though,
well, so long as you accept the idea that the only way to right past wrongs is to kill everybody.
Well, yes. Well,
I would take issue with killing everybody.
I meant in a more metaphorical way.
Fair, okay.
His representation of indigenous resistance to Western colonialism and imperialism, that's fine.
Yes.
The way that gets actualized in I'm going to kill everything that's not us.
Yes.
Because I really would have liked to have seen more solidarity between Wakanda and Talocan.
I think it was a real missed opportunity. If you wanted to make a radical film, that kind of cooperation
and I would have,
be truly radical.
And the fact that it was more Namor manipulating Wakanda than the U.S. manipulating, because that's the thing is one of the things I struggled with was just Wakanda and Talocan are doing exactly what the West wants them to do. They're fighting each other,
right?
And Wakanda's in bad shape at the end of this film.
Right.
They've lost their third monarch or second monarch. They're on their third. or fourth if you count his father.
Right.
With M'Baku. We never got a really sense of how devastated the Wakandan capital is.
Right. But it had to be devastated.
But it had to be pretty devastated for. Yeah. I mean, in the comics, when Namor did that in the comics, like Wakanda was destroyed.
Yeah.
So that was yeah. So yeah, I could see what they were going for with Namor, and I appreciate the effort to have him represent sort of indigenous peoples in the Americas, and
right.
But it's a bit muddled.
Right, and just representation doesn't solve the problem.
And I think
we should have learned from Super Friends back in the 70s.
Well, and I think also the point is it gets muddled because he ultimately has to fulfill a particular position within the superhero
because
trope.
There's a formula that must be obeyed in the telling of this story.
Yeah.
I do realize I skipped over. Would this count as a plot roast? I find it completely unbelievable that Riri has built this vibranium detecting machine. And I believe that she built it.
Out of scraps.
Right, out of scraps. But now that the United States government has it, they can't rebuild. They can't build another one. There's only one. I find that suspicious. Oh, and on the wings on the feet, one final point, too. I am told that you can sell foot pictures to people, so maybe this is a reference to foot picture sales.
You mean like WikiFeet?
I don't know what you call them.
I think that's one of the foot fetish websites. Is WikiFeet.
Well, I do not know that website, but I will trust your...
things you pick up on the web.
Your wingy feet.
I mean, Namor probably would make a killing.
Wait, did you say the kind of things you just pick up on the web?
I did, possibly, yes. Just things you know.
Yeah,
when you're as dialed into things as I am.
Yes, the youth culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about Riri and Ironheart.
To me, felt so tacked onto the movie.
Yeah.
I don't know quite what to do with it.
Yeah, well, and the other thing that really bothers me is at the end when, she's got her car back, and then Shuri's like, well, you can't take your armor back with you. She's like, yeah, totally fine. I'm like, okay. So we've completely reset her to exactly where she was at the beginning of this film so that we can pick up with her in Ironheart. But it's not like the way in which that not only can she be lifted from this film, but everything that happens in this film is sort of kind of put into a little pocket and doesn't really need to do any. It doesn't seem like it would necessarily carry on.
Would you describe that as a little plot hammery?
I don't know if I'd say it's. I mean, it's.
It is. It's like plotting in a circle so that you get her to the starting point for the next one.
It
drives me nuts.
It's more. I mean, it's plot hammery in the sense that it ultimately her entire arc sort of ends up being irrelevant. Particularly to things outside of this film. It's almost like, we want to introduce this character, but not in a way that's going to require people to have seen this movie before Ironheart drops on Disney+. So
it's this kind of Easter egg mania.
Yeah, I don't really have, I thought the actress was fine, the role was fine. I might have liked to have seen more of her and Shuri teaming up as science, well, they wouldn't be science bros like Tony and Bruce, yeah. So they'd be.
I don't even
science
hear where you're going with it. Oh boy,
science sisters. Like I would have liked to have seen more of that. There's a little bit of that, but yeah, I mean, she just ultimately feels kind of tacked into the film. Like we need a scientist to have built a vibranium detector. I'm like, oh, you need a scientist that's connected to Namor and Black Panther? I can think of one.
Who's that?
Reed Richards.
Oh,
who probably could have invented a vibranium detector? Like again,
yeah.
Like just make it Reed Richards.
Yeah, right.
Like it would have made much more sense.
And then you've got people excited because Reed Richards is part of the universe. Then the film does something to get people looking forward.
Yeah.
And as we said earlier, it doesn't really necessarily do this.
Yeah. So
would you say this film is unfair in the way in which it forces Black queer silence?
Oh wow.
Well, I have there's
a
review online.
Yeah,
because I want to love on Black Panther bravely and openly, but we can't forget the asterisk. We cannot forget that a significant achievement for Black representation once again came on the back of forced queer Black silence.
What do they mean by forced queer Black silence?
Well, you asked that as if I read the entire review. I kind of did this like you do your numbers. I'm just trying to find quotes to push.
Well, because I've seen complaint. You get the one because in the comics, the Midnight Angels are Anika, who is the one that is the Midnight Angel in the film, and Io, who's the one's in charge of the Dora Milaje, the one that worked with Bucky in getting him deprogrammed.
Okay.
And there's the one moment at the end of the film when you see them kiss and refer to each other as, and they are in a relationship in the comics. And I've seen a lot of complaints, not so much on sort of queer black silence, but on Marvel's kind of continued, like, gesturing at, queer identity, but not being within any, right. But doing it in a very, like, all of those scenes have been cut for, I think, Kuwaiti distribution of the film.
Right.
But, yeah, so I've seen it more of, and I'm not remembering exactly how I phrased it, but it's more of kind of Marvel sort of trying to pander to a queer audience without actually giving them anything substantive.
Like Marvel wants to pander towards like politically alternative solutions without actually giving them real or meaningful.
Because absent the one little peck on the cheek that they have at the end of the film, they're not together in the film otherwise. There's nothing. Yeah. So it is again this very sort of gestural sort of so. If by forced queer black silence she means there's none of it in there, or he means there's none of it in there, I'm like, well, no, it's there. It's just there in the same kind of very minimal,
sanitized,
unabrasive kind of way that it's always been.
Marginalized kind of way.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So so largely fair in that, it's a moment that I'm like, once again, queer black audiences have to be satisfied with the tiny little dollop they get.
Kind of a hint, or
but nothing more than that.
So we're almost out of time. The question that I have to ask you is the obvious one. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should have started with. Mm-hmm. Where does this rank for you in your pantheon of Marvel movies?
Of Marvel?
Is it better than Age of Ultron?
No. I really like Age of Ultron.
Oh, that's true. I think, like, when I think of Age of Ultron,
I know
I
you
think,
do.
like,
Yeah,
number 27 on the list.
No, Age of Ultron is top 12
movie
for me, probably.
So about Black Adam?
No.
No. Though it is fun. Bet where I said Black Adam would be.
Though a lot of people, it is interesting. A lot of people are like, Black Panther made in one weekend what Black Adam made in its entire run so far.
So Black Adam did not have legs.
Black Adam did not have legs and did not wow audiences in the way that I think they were hoping. Which is probably good because The Rock was sort of positioning himself as like the next guide of the DCEU, and I'm like, I'm not sure that's The Rock's.
No,
I like The Rock, but I don't know that.
I love The Rock, but not in that.
So yeah, for me, it's definitely not down with the worst.
I agree with that.
Like it's better than Thor 2. It's better than Love and Thunder. It's better than Iron Man 2.
Yep.
It's right now for me. I'd say
better than Ant-Man.
It's maybe comparable to Ant-Man.
So Ant-Man's kind of like, as I'm trying to remember your rankings, would be kind of high middle of the pack.
Yeah, I mean, again, Ant-Man is kind of like it's better than the first Doctor Strange.
Agreed. Yeah.
But along with the first Doctor Strange, along with Ant-Man, it's a film that is, as you've sort of pointed out, it struggles with the ways in which it's being shoehorned into a formula.
It's better than in Eternals.
Yeah.
It's better than Shang-Chi.
Yeah. Or for me, it's about the same. Like it's all very there's a very the Marvel squishy middle is getting very big.
Yeah,
Phase 4 has done a lot to expand the squishy middle.
It used to be like middle age, right?
It used to be like
middle gets bigger, bigger and bigger.
There's like the 3 Marvel films that are not good.
Yeah,
and then the rest of them are varying levels of good to great. And now there's a squishy middle of like
and it's getting pretty squishy. Maybe on second viewing you'll see it.
We'll see
as something better. But remember in the Halcyon days when we first started doing this podcast, peak superhero times. One of the things we said about Marvel that I think was true, that helped to move things along, was they were creating a lot of superhero films, but they kind of did genre-based formulas. And I feel the deeper we get into the MCU, there has now become an MCU formula that swamps, it being a caper picture or it being a 70s spy picture or whatnot.
Well, I
feel like something's been lost along the way.
Well, and I would add to that, I think since since they became part of Disney. We've talked about this before, that the Disney has kind of launched, I think we talked about with Eternals.
Yeah.
That, there's a conservatism that comes with being a Disney product. That I think Marvel. I think a lot.
The MCU was never radical to begin with, but it was willing to ask different questions.
Yes, and now it seems to, because there is a good geopolitical thriller in this movie. It gets derailed by the ways in which it has to fit into a kind of safe Disney superhero formula.
There's like 3 or 4 really good movies in here.
Yeah.
That all get kind of crammed into the superhero formula.
Yeah,
and to me that was the ultimate.
And that's the problem.
It just felt like too much jumbled together.
Yeah, I mean, again, maybe it's too much to expect, that from Disney, we're going to get even the pseudo radicalism that we used to get.
Yeah.
Though
Fair enough,
I think,
but at least give me a better movie then.
Yeah. But I think we're just gonna have to settle ourselves. Like, there's gonna be a lot of films like this, and not just in all of Disney franchises. And occasionally, we're gonna get an Andor.
Yeah, Andor is really standing out.
Yeah.
Honestly, in kind of the context.
I saw a really fun tweet that was like, other Star Wars directors. I'm gonna make a movie based on how I played with my action figures.
Yeah.
Tony Gilroy. Armed revolution is the only response to fascism. And I'm like, yep, that's pretty much.
I saw that on the Twitter too.
And I'm like, that's a good one, yeah.
Which is good because the Twitter obviously not going to be around much longer. As far as
I don't know what's going on with that.
Talk about taking one big ship into the middle of the ocean and battling the fish people.
Yeah, but that's all. But no, because it's different. It's taking your one big ship that you yourself have deliberately sabotaged into the ocean with the sea people.
Like you're charging people $8 to come on the voyage or whatever.
Though I have to say, I have really enjoyed just the proliferation of fake accounts. Yeah. That it tanked Eli Lilly's stock and Lockheed Martin's stock. I'm like, oh yeah.
See, the younger generation, they've got some radical in it.
I do like this younger generation. It's like, we literally cost Eli Lilly
there's hope that they might build a better world.
So much.
Yeah, and they might even do it with a sense of humor.
Yeah,
which would be pretty cool.
So, but yeah, so I maybe it's unfair that given everything this film sort of was working against, and I will give Cooler credit for probably doing
absolutely
about as good as you can, and not being able to make the movie he wanted for circumstances outside of his control.
Right. But my plea in the future is let's just pick a story and tell it, and not 12. Yeah. So anyway, post-peak superhero.
Yeah.
That seems to be the big takeaway.
It does, yeah. Well, we don't know what we're doing for next week's show, so.
Oh, we don't?
Well, no, because we're going to release this show this week, and then we've either got Weird for next week, and we're not taping a new show next week, or we're doing Toy Hall of Fame next weekend.
Oh, the Toy Hall of Fame is classic.
Yeah. There's going to be things to talk about.
Oh, boy. All right, so
one way or another.
You know what's always good is a cliffhanger.
Yes, ooh, that's right.
It would be like choose your own story, but just
we'll choose. What show will we do?